everybody, it's Ruby, and today I wanted to do a video kind of updating you guys on the books that I'm currently reading. I'm unable to do a sort of like wrap-up / TBR video just because I haven't really finished that many books that I had been saying that I would read in August. And I also am reading a lot more casually than I necessarily would for book 2, because I find that a lot of people will read books and sort of track their progress, and they'll say, you know, what they've read in a particular month, and that's not necessarily something that I can do. Just because I'm reading so many books for classes, that anything I read casually is going to take a lot more time for me to finish. So I just kind of wanted to update you guys on what I'm reading. I do know that some people had asked me to do some reviews. I know on the Murakami book and 1984, and those are books that are like on my top list of books just in general that I've been wanting to read. So it's not like I've given up on them or that I'm not going to do reviews on them. It's just that a 1,000-page book is a little daunting when you're reading other books as well. So just keep that in mind. But you guys have been wonderful. The comments that you guys did on my previous video when I updated you guys were wonderful, and I thought they would be. So thank you guys. One last thing, which I think is really funny, is that I'm actually filming in front of a window. I'm trying to get more light going on in these videos, just because it's cloudy, and also because the bookshelf in my room is probably in the worst location for lighting, and I'm not gonna buy lights. So I'm actually, because the window, like the curtains are open and stuff like that, I can actually see into my next door neighbor's window as well. And I think it's kind of funny that she can probably watch me filming myself, which always feels a lot less legit than if someone else is filming you. Because if someone else is filming you, at least they think it's like a photo shoot or like an actual legit film, rather than, you know, some geek talking about books in their study, right? But whatever. They're not doing this, so. Anyways, let's get onto the books that I am reading. So the first is book 5 of Promethea. I had mentioned in my last wrap-up / TBR video that I had read the first 3 books of Promethea and that I had been waiting to get the 4th and the 5th. So I read the 4th, I'm on to the 5th. I would like to do a book review on this. I think it's pretty similar in terms of like themes and stuff as A Voice of Fire, which I did a book review on like 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, a lot of the reasons that I like this book I've kind of mentioned before as to why I like Ellen more, but I mean, why not? It's really awesome. And this sort of book is really nice because you don't have to use a lot of brain power when you read it. The second one is one that I had mentioned that I picked up in a haul randomly because I knew the title and it had been recommended before, and that is The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out of the Window and Disappeared. I had watched the movie first, which I know is pretty blasphemous, but I do think that, like, I don't know. I don't have an excuse, really. And the person I had been watching it with actually said that the movie isn't nearly as funny as the book is, because the book kind of goes into a lot more absurd detail about what he's doing and what's happening. Because of that, I thought that I would get a head start reading this. So far, I'm on page like 40 or something. I'm only like a couple of chapters in, but it's okay. I don't know. I'm not sure if watching the movie sort of ruined some of the surprises for me, if it's funny because they're surprises, or maybe I'm just need to be at the right mindset or whatever. I don't know yet, but we'll see. I have a couple of textbooks that I wanted to mention as well that I've been reading, just because I'm a nerd and you guys said that I could do this, so I will. So I have The Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud. I am actually taking an English class that studies the literary Freud. So I guess the idea that although Freud is not necessarily considered as valid in terms of psychology, like I've never read anything by Freud in a psychology class, he still has contributed a lot to what we think of psychology and the sort of phrases and things that we think of. Because of that, he is also looking into, I guess apparently Freud was very literary. He read a lot, he wrote a lot, he was very interested and knowledgeable about historical contexts and cultural contexts. So a lot of the analyses he did on people is very similar to the analyses that we did in literary theory. So I guess we're looking at this in a couple of different ways. So it's interesting. Anyways, I started reading this, and I think the most interesting thing is that I expected it to be extremely dry. It is like more than 100 years old, and I expected it to be like very, philosophical, a lot of lack of introduction to things, but it's actually really well written and kind of conversational, which I think is quite interesting. And the theory that he has on dreams, although it's like one very generalized theory about wish fulfillment, the way that he sort of says that it matters more about your own analyses of the dream and how it's an amalgamation of images throughout the last day or what's been going on in your mind, and how your interpretation of it kind of results in the meaning of the dream, is something that I knew to exist but didn't realize was actually sort of Freud's idea, which is really cool. This next book I never thought that I'd actually read. It was recommended to me by a TA who I was talking to about how I had to take like a upper level stats class and a like research methods class, and I'm not very good at that sort of thing. So he had suggested this book, and that is Understanding Statistics, Basic Theory and Practice by Grant Foster. It basically teaches statistics in a way that I wish I had been taught in high school, and I would recommend it to anybody who's having trouble with statistics or sort of needs to understand it, or even just trying to find similar books in math if for some reason you want to be a keener. It basically teaches statistics contextually. So it goes through each aspect of statistics and sort of builds on the previous theory and talks about why we do things in a certain way. And so it explains the formulas. I've been reading this to try and better understand the statistics class I'm in, like I said, and it has been helping quite a bit. There have been like parts where I didn't quite understand it, and there was one part that I sort of skimmed, and I realized that I had to understand in order to better understand the future theories that he was talking about. But I noticed that that wasn't necessarily because of the way he was explaining it. It was the fact that I wasn't paying enough attention to it. Like if I went back and I actually, read it, I would understand it, which I think is the best you can really do in something like this. So I definitely recommend it. This is sort of a reactionary book to, for anybody who's kind of wondering why I would recommend this book compared to other textbooks. It's because it's a reactionary book to a lot of the textbooks that are more formulaic and, like he says, like cookbooks. So just saying, okay, this is what we have to do, this is the formula, this is how you do it, here's some examples, which to a lot of people you don't really understand because there's not a lot of other classes that are like that, right? So he kind of more talks about why, which I think is really cool. Next I have Embodied Cognition by Lawrence Shapiro. This is for my Embodied Cognitive Science class, which I had mentioned before. This is the same class that sort of inspired me to pick up the Society of Mind. And it's, I think he calls it like meta psychology, where it's talks about some of the theories in psychology and the differences between those theories. Embodied cognition is tries to break away from more of the representative side of the mind. So instead of just thinking of it like a computer with a whole bunch of little bits that think, we also take into account our environment, our interaction with our bodies, and interactions with other people, because you can't really have cognition without having something to react against. So there's different like levels and different theories behind that, but this is sort of an introductory book. The reason that I mentioned this one rather than a couple of other others that I've read is because it's actually a philosophy book. Shapiro is a philosopher in Embodied Cognition, which is sort of where a lot of the basis of these theories are. It is a relatively hard book to understand, like you need to have your brain on, and it is obviously a textbook, but for anybody interested in this topic, this is probably the best book to start off with. Lastly is a movie that I actually watched, which I really need to read the book for. Again, it was something that I watched the movie first before reading the book, although I kind of have an excuse for this one. In the same Embodied Cognition class, we have to do media reviews, which are really interesting. I wish we had done them in other classes. I think it's really cool, where we basically watch, read, or listen to a particular media that the professor recommends. He has like a bookshelf of different things that you can pick, and you have to relate it back to the class. So it's basically a paper applying theories that you're learning in class to interesting movies or fiction or nonfiction books. I picked A Scanner Darkly. I had previously picked Labyrinths and Other Short Stories by Borges, which is right up my alley. It's magical realism and sort of speculative fiction, but it was a really thick, like 400-page book of short stories, and I wasn't really sure if I was going to be able to relate all the stories together, if one story was enough to write like a five-page paper on, considering that a lot of the stories were 5 pages, and a lot of it was like more on the sort of abstract side that the class tries to break away from. So I had a lot of troubles with that. Instead, I picked a relatively easy movie, considering that I had watched it before, and because my dad is really interested in the author it's based off of. So the movie is A Scanner Darkly. The book is also called A Scanner Darkly. I'm just covering up the label because it actually shows the university I'm at. I've actually mentioned like the city I live in previous videos, and someone recognized me on campus. It's not like I'm really hiding where I'm like studying, but it also has my professor's information, which I'm pretty sure he would not be that great sharing to the internet. So that is that. It is basically a movie about someone who is a narc. He is like an undercover detective cop who is investigating someone for basically distributing substance D, which is a fictional drug. He is also addicted to said drug because he's a narc, and he is living with roommates who are also addicted to it. He's basically infiltrating his own house. It actually gets to the point where he is watching himself. Like his house is being filmed and he's watching himself. It's never really explored as to why. It could be, like in the book, could be explained, but the purpose of the movie wasn't necessarily to explain the logistics of like the legalities of the drug, and more so what happens when you're on it, because a lot of people have some really debilitating things that happen. It's based off of like a true story by Philip K. Dick. Like he like semi-autobiographical, where at a certain point in the 70s he was basically living in a house previously owned by him and his wife. When she left, he had a whole bunch of boarders who were addicted to drugs, and he ended up addicted to amphetamines. So he wrote this book to try and talk about his experiences. I also have the book with me. My dad is really interested in Philip K. Dick. He is probably like one of the fathers of science fiction. And he's written a whole bunch of other stuff you probably recognize. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, also known as Blade Runner, Minority Report. I think the movie Adjustment Bureau was based off of one of his short stories. Things like that. So I wanted to mention the movie because it's a great, just cerebral movie. Like, considering that I had to actually watch it for a psychology class, kind of shows some of the different themes that I guess you'd come across. And I'm also talking about the book because it's based off of the book, and I'm thinking that I should probably read it at some point. So that's going to be added to my long list of books that I should read. So that is everything. I rambled on a bit, but I wanted to catch you guys up on this. So yeah, thanks again, you guys, for being awesome and putting up with my rather sporadic schedule. Subscribe, like, do your thing, and I will talk to you guys later.